Multiple choice questions. What is a major source of atmospheric nitrous oxide? Agricultural fertilizers. Nitrogen based fertilizers release nitrous oxide through microbial processes. Which atmospheric layer contains weather phenomena? Troposphere. The troposphere hosts weather due to convection and moisture. Due to convection and moisture. What is a primary role of the atmosphere in climate control? Regulates heat. The atmosphere regulates temperature via greenhouse gas. Why does temperature increase in the stratosphere? Ozone absorption in UV. Ozone absorption UV radiation hitting the stratosphere. Which gas contributes significantly to photochemical smoke? Volatile organic compounds. Volatile organic compounds reacts with nitrogen oxide in sunlight to form photochemical smoke. Hot chemical primarily depletes stratospheric ozone. Chlorine. Chlorine from CFC chlorofluorocarbons catalyze ozone destruction. How does the ozone layer benefit ecosystems? Reduce UV damage. The ozone layer shields ecosystem from harmful radiations. What process decreased methane in Earth's early atmosphere? Oxidation. Methane was oxidized as oxygen level rose in the atmosphere. What is a key feature of the troposphere? Convection currents. Convection derives weather patterns in the troposphere. Why does the north hemisphere receive less solar energy in January? Earth axial tilt. The northern hemispheres tilt away from the sun, reducing solar inputs. What does Köppen classification B represents? Arid. Köppen B denotes dry climates due with low precipitation. What percentage of solar radiation reaches Earth's surface? 50%. About 50% of solar radiation penetrates the atmosphere to the surface. What factor most reduce incoming solar radiation? Thick clouds. Thick clouds reflect and scatter significant solar radiations. What least influence global temperature variations? Population density. Population density has minimal direct impact on global temperature. What property of electromagnetic radiation affects its absorption? Wavelength. Specific wavelength are absorbed by atmospheric gases. Which wind belt derives weather in mid latitudes? Westerlies. Westerlies influence weather in mid latitudes via the ferrule cell. What type of wind is driving by daytime heating on slopes? Anabatic. Anabatic winds flow uphill due to daytime heating. What derives heavy rainfall in Bangladesh monsoon season? Dry esterlies. No, it What derives heavy rainfall in Bangladesh monsoon season? Moist southeast winds. What derives heavy rainfall is Bangladesh monsoon season. Moist southeast winds. Moist southeast winds. What creates the equatorial low pressure zone? Rising warm air. Intense solar heating causes air to rise, forming a low pressure zone, which force reflects winds in the southern hemisphere. Coriolis force. The Coriolis force deflects winds to the left in the southern hemisphere. What is a primary moisture source for Bangladesh's climate? The Bay of Bengal. The Bay of Bengal supplies moisture for monsoon rains. Which reservoir holds the least fresh water? Rivers. Rivers hold a small fraction of Earth's fresh water. What lifting mechanism involves air masses colliding? Frontal wedging. Cold air forces warm air upward at fronts, forming clouds. Which cloud type is associated with light precipitation? Stratus. Stratus clouds produce light drizzle or rain. What forms when water vapor condenses on surface at night? Dew. Dew forms when water vapor condenses on cool surface. What process derives snow formation in cold clouds? Bergeron process. Ice crystals grow in cold clouds, leading to snow. What is absorbed when ice melts? Latent heat. Latent heat is absorbed during the phase change to liquid. What does sensible heat primarily affect? Air temperature. Sensible heat changes air temperature without phase transition. What is the dew point temperature? Saturation temperature. The dew point is when air becomes saturated, causing condensation. Which circulation field derives polar easterlies? Polar cell. The polar cell generates easterly winds near the poles. What is a characteristic of a tropical cyclone's eye wall? Strongest winds. The eye wall contains the cyclone's most intense winds and rain. What is the global effect of La Nina? Increased rainfall in South Asia. La Nina enhanced monsoon rainfall in South Asia. What derives monsoon wind in Bangladesh? Land ocean temperature gradient. Differential heating derives monsoon circulation. What does Max Planck law quantify for atmospheric radiation? Spectral distribution. It quantifies radiation emission by wavelength and temperature. How does temperature affect tropospheric chemistry? Increased reaction rates. Higher temperature accelerate chemical reactions in the troposphere. What is a natural source of atmospheric aerosol? Dust storms. Dust storms lift particles into the atmosphere as aerosols. How do fine aerosols affect climate? Reflect sunlight. Fine aerosols reflect sunlight, causing cooling effect. What health issues is linked to ultrafine aerosol? Respiratory inflammation. Ultrafine aerosols irritate lungs, causing inflammation. What gas forms nitric acid in acid rain? Nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen oxide react with water to form nitric acid in acid rain. How does acid rain affect infrastructure? Corrodes materials. Acid rain erodes buildings and infrastructures. Hot process transforms aerosols in the atmosphere. Chemical reaction. Which cloud type is associated with light precipitation? Stardust clouds produce light drizzle or rain. What forms when water vapor condenses on surfaces at night? Dew. Dew forms when a water vapor condenses on cool surface. Hot process derives snow formation in cold clouds. Bergeron process. Ice crystals grow in cold clouds leading to snow. What is absorbed when ice melts? Latent heat. Latent heat is absorbed during the phase change to liquid. What does sensible heat primarily affect? Air temperature. What is the dew point temperature? Saturation temperature. The dew point is when air becomes saturated, causing condensation. Which circulation cell derives polar easterlies? Polar cell. The polar cell generates easterly winds near the poles. What is the characteristics of tropical cyclones? Eye wall. Strongest winds. The eye wall contains the cyclone's most intense wind and rain. What is the global effect of La Nina? Increased rainfall in South Asia. La Nina enhances monsoon rainfall in South Asia. What derives monsoon wind in Bangladesh? Wind ocean temperature gradient differential heating derives monsoon circulation. What does Max Planck's law quantify for atmospheric radiation? Spectral distribution. The quantifies radiation emissions by wavelength and temperature. How does temperature affect tropospheric chemistry? Increases reaction rates. Higher temperature accelerate chemical reactions in the troposphere. What is the natural source of atmospheric aerosols? Dust storms. Dust storms lift particles into the atmosphere as aerosols. How do fine aerosols affect climates? Reflect sunlight. Fine aerosols reflect sunlight, causing cooling effects. What health issues is linked to ultrafine aerosols? Respiratory inflammation. Ultrafine aerosols irritates lungs, causing inflammation. Hot gas forms nitric acid in acid rain. Nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen oxide reacts with water to form nitric acid in acid rains. How does acid rain affect infrastructure? Corrodes materials. Acid rain erodes buildings and infrastructure. Hot process transform aerosols in the atmosphere. Chemical reaction. Reactions like oxidation alters aerosol composition. What is critical for pollutant dispersion modeling? Atmospheric stability. Stability affects how pollutants disperse vertically. How does secondary aerosols formed? Gas to particle conversion. Gases like sulfur dioxide reacts to form secondary aerosols. What anthropogenic activity contributes to global warming? Deforestation. Deforestation reduces carbon sinks, increasing carbon dioxide levels. Which greenhouse gas is emitted from rice paddies? Methane. Methane is produced by anaerobic decomposition in rice fields. How does climate change affect Bangladesh fisheries? Causes habitat loss. Rising temperatures and salinity disrupt fish habitats. What cause atmospheric instability in Bangladesh monsoon? Warm, moist air rising. Rising warm, moist air triggers storms and heavy rainfall. What is a socio-economic impact of climate change in Bangladesh? Displacement of communities, floods and cyclones, forced migration disrupting communities. What is a major source of atmospheric methane? Wetlands. Wetlands produce methane through anaerobic decomposition. Which atmospheric layer experience the lowest temperature? Mesosphere. The mesosphere reaches temperature as low as minus 90 degrees Celsius due to low air density. What is the primary function of the atmosphere in UV protection? Absorbs UV radiation. The ozone layer absorbs harmful UV radiation, protecting life. Why does temperature decrease in the mesosphere with altitudes? Low air density. Sparse air molecules reduce heat retention in the mesosphere. Which gas has a short atmospheric lifetime but high global warming potential? Methane. Methane has a 12-year lifetime but is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. What substance accelerates ozone depletion in polar regions? Bromine. Bromine from halogens catalyze ozone destruction in polar regions. How does the ozone layer benefit agriculture? Protects crops from UV. The ozone layer prevents UV damage to crops, improving yields. What was a minor component of Earth's early atmosphere? Oxygen. Oxygen was scarce until photosynthesis increased its levels. What derives weather patterns in the troposphere? Convection currents. Convection derives air movement forming weather systems. Why does the southern hemisphere have warmer summer in January? Earth axial tilt. The southeast hemisphere tilts toward the sun in January, increasing solar inputs. What does Köppen classification C denote? Temperate. Köppen C represents mild, temperate climates with distinct seasons. What percentage of solar radiation is reflected by clouds? 25%. Clouds reflect about 20% of incoming solar radiation. What factor most enhance atmospheric absorption in solar radiation? Greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and water vapor absorb solar radiation. What primarily derives global temperature gradients? Latitudes. Latitudes determines solar radiation intensity driving temperature gradients. What property of electromagnetic radiation affect its penetration? Wavelength. Specific wavelength penetrate or absorbed by the atmosphere. Which wind belt is associated with the equatorial law? Trade winds. Trade winds converge at the equatorial law driving rainfall. What type of wind flows downhill due to cooling? Katabatic. Katabatic winds flow downhill due to nighttime cooling. What derives heavy rainfall in Bangladesh monsoon season? Moist southeast winds. Moist winds from the Bay of Bengal fuel heavy monsoon rains. What creates the subpolar low pressure belts? Rising warm air. Warm air rises at 60-degree latitudes, forming the subpolar low. Which force deflects wind in the northern hemisphere? Coriolis force. The Coriolis force deflects winds to the right in the northern hemispheres. What is the primary moisture source for South Asia monsoon? Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean, including the Bay of Bengal, supplies monsoon moisture. Which reservoir held the most carbon? Oceans. Oceans store vast amount of carbon as dissolved carbon dioxide and carbonates. What lifting mechanism involves air rising over terrain? Orographic lift. Air rises over mountains, cooling and forming clouds. Which cloud type indicates fair weather? Cumulus. Cumulus clouds are puffy, and associated with clear weather. What forms when water vapor condenses near the ground? Fog. Fog forms when water vapor condenses in air near the surface. What process derives precipitation in cold clouds? Bergeron process. Ice crystals grow in cold clouds leading to precipitation. What is released during water condensation? Latent heat. Latent heat is released when water vapor condenses. What does relative humidity measure? Saturation percentage. Relative humidity shows how close air is to saturation. Which circulation cell derives westerlies? Ferrel cell. The ferrel cell generates westerlies in mid latitudes. What is a feature of a tropical cyclone structure? Low pressure eye. The eye is a calm low pressure region in the cyclone. What is a common effect of El Nino and South Asia? Reduced rainfall. El Nino weakens monsoon, causing drier conditions. What sustains monsoon circulation in Bangladesh? Land ocean temperature contrast. What does Max Planck's law describe for Earth radiation spectral distribution. It quantifies radiation emissions by wavelength and temperature. How does temperature affect aerosol chemistry? Enhance reaction rates. Higher temperature accelerate chemical reactions forming aerosols. What is a natural source of atmospheric aerosols? Volcanic ash. Volcanic eruptions release ash and particles as aerosols. How do aerosols affect visibility? Scattered light. Aerosols scatter sunlight, reducing visibility. What health risk is associated with ultrafine aerosol? Cardiovascular problems. Ultrafine aerosols can enter the bloodstreams, causing health issues. What gas contributes to nitric acid in acid rain? Nitrogen oxides. Nitrogen oxide reflect Nitrogen oxide reacts to form nitric acid in acid rain. How does acid rain affect soil? Leaches nutrients. Acid rain removes essential soil nutrients, harming plants. What process forms secondary aerosols? Gas to particle conversion. Gases like sulfur dioxide reacts to form secondary aerosols. What is essential for modeling pollutant transport? Wind direction. Wind direction determines pollutants transport path. How are primary aerosols generated? Mechanical processes. Processes like dust storms produce primary aerosols. What anthropogenic activity derives global warming? Fossil fuels combustion. Burning fossil fuels release carbon dioxide, driving global warming. Which greenhouse gas is emitted from livestock digestion? Methane. Methane is produced by anaerobic digestion in livestock. How does climate change affect Bangladesh's water resource? Causes salinization. Sea level rise leads to saltwater intrusion in water resource. What indicates atmospheric instability in Bangladesh's monsoon? Rapid air ascent. Warm, moist air rising triggers storms and heavy rainfall. What is the socio-economic impact of climate change in Bangladesh? Economic losses. Floods and cyclones cause economic damage to agriculture and infrastructure. What is a primary source of atmospheric carbon dioxide today? Fossil fuel combustion. Burning fossil fuels release significant carbon dioxide, driving climate change. Which atmospheric layer hosts the aqueous? Thermosphere. Auroras occur in the thermosphere due to charged particle interactions. What is the key function of the atmosphere in temperature regulations? Traps infrared radiation. Greenhouse gases trap infrared radiation, warming the earth. Why does temperature increase in the thermosphere with altitudes? Solar particle absorption. High energy solar particles hit the sparse gases in the thermosphere. Which gas contributes to tropospheric ozone formation? Nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen oxide reacts with volatile organic carbons in sunlight to form ground level ozones. What enhances ozone depletion in the Antarctic stratosphere? Polar stratospheric clouds. These clouds enable chlorine reactions, depleting ozones. How does the ozone layer protect marine ecosystems? reduce UV damage. The ozone layer shields marine life from harmful UV radiation. What process increased oxygen in Earth's early atmosphere? Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis by early organisms increased atmospheric oxygen levels. What is a primary feature of the troposphere? Weather phenomena. The troposphere hosts weather due to convection and moisture. Why does the northern hemispheres have warmer summers in July? Earth axial tilt. The northern hemisphere tilts toward the sun in July, increasing solar input. What does Köppen classification age denote? Highlight. Köppen age represents high altitudes, climate with unique characteristics. What percentage of solar radiations is absorbed by Earth's surface? 50%. About 50% of solar radiation reaches and the absorbed by the surface. What factors most enhance Earth albedo? Snow cover. Snow reflects a high percentage of solar radiation, increasing albedo. What derives annual temperature variations? Earth tilt. The tilt causes seasonal variations in solar radiation. What property of electromagnetic radiation affects its atmospheric absorption? Wavelength. Specific wavelengths are absorbed by atmospheric gases like ozone, which wind belt derives mid-latitude weather system. Westerlies. Westerlies influence weather in mid-latitudes via the Ferrel cell. What type of wind flows uphill due to daytime heating? Anabatic. Anabatic winds rise due to daytime heating of slopes. What triggers heavy rainfall in Bangladesh's monsoon season? Moist southwest winds. Moist winds from the Bay of Bengal fuel monsoon rainfall. What creates the polar high pressure belts? Sinking cold air. Cold air sinks at the poles, forming high pressure zones, which force initiates wind movement in the atmosphere. Pressure gradient force. Air moves from high to low pressure, driving winds. What is the primary moisture source for Bangladesh's monsoon? Bay of Bengal. Evaporation from the Bay of Bengal supplies monsoon moisture. Which reservoir cycle water most rapidly? Atmosphere. The atmosphere cycle water quickly through evaporation and precipitation. What lifting mechanism involves warm air rising naturally? Convection. Warm air rising due to heating, forming clouds. Which cloud type is associated with thunderstorms? Cumulonimbus. Cumulonimbus clouds produce thunderstorm and heavy rain. What forms when water vapor turns to ice on surface? Frost. Frost form when water vapor deposits as ice and cold surface. What process derives rain formation in warm clouds? Coalescence. Droplets collides and merge to forms raindrops. What is absorbed during water evaporation? Latent heat. Latent heat is absorbed when water changes to vapor. What does sensible heat influence in the atmosphere? Air temperature. Sensitive heat changes air temperature with phase transitions. What is the dew point of measure of saturation temperature? The dew point is when air becomes saturated, causing condensation. Where circulation cell derives subtropical high pressure Hartley cell. The Hartley cell creates high pressure at 30-degree latitude. What is the characteristics of tropical cyclone I? Calm condition. The eye is a low pressure calm region in the cyclone center. What is the global effect of El Nino? Reduced rainfall in South Asia. El Nino weakens monsoons causing drier conditions. What initiates monsoon wane in South Asia? Land heating. Heated land creates low pressure during moist air. What does Max Planck's law describes for atmospheric gases? Spectral distribution. It quantifies radiation emissions by wavelength and temperature. How does temperature affect photochemical reaction? Increase reaction rates. Higher temperature accelerate photochemical reaction. What is a natural source of atmospheric aerosols? Sea salt. Sea salt aerosols from ocean spray. How do aerosols influence climate? Scatter sunlight. Aerosols scatter sunlight causing cooling effects. What health issues is linked to fine aerosol? Respiratory problem. Fine aerosols irritate lungs causing breathing issues. Hot gas forms sulfuric acid in acid rain. Sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide oxidizes to form sulfuric acid in acid rain. How does acid rain affect forest? Leaches soil nutrients. Acid rain removes nutrients, harming forest health. What process alters aerosol composition in the atmosphere? Chemical reaction. Reaction like oxidation transform aerosol composition. What is critical for modeling pollutants dispersion? Atmospheric turbulence. Turbulence affects low pollutants mix and spread. How are primary aerosol formed? Mechanical processes. Processes like dust storms produced primary aerosols. What anthropogenic activity contributes to global warming? Coal combustion. Coal burning release carbon dioxide driving global warming. Which greenhouse gas is emitted from landfills? Methane. Methane is produced by decomposing waste in landfills. How does climate change affect Bangladesh coastal ecosystems? Increased salinization. Sea level rise causes saltwater intrusion, harming ecosystems. What causes atmospheric instability during Bangladesh's monsoon? Warm moist air rising. Rising warm moist air triggers storms and heavy rainfall. What is a socio-economic impact of climate change in Bangladesh? Loss of livelihoods. Floods and cyclones disrupt farming and fishing, impacting livelihoods. What is the primary source of atmospheric ammonia? Agricultural activities. Ammonia is released from fertilizers and livestock waste in agriculture, whose atmospheric layer is characterized by ionized gases. Thermosphere. The thermosphere contains ionized gases forming the ionospheres. What is a key role of the atmosphere in climate regulation? Traps heat. Greenhouse gases traps infrared radiation warming the earth. Why does temperature decreased in the troposphere with altitudes? Decreasing pressure. Lower pressure reduce air density causing a temperature drop. Which gas contributes to photochemical smoke formation? Volatile organic compounds. Volatile organic compounds reacts with nitrogen oxide in sunlight to form photochemical smoke. Hot substance catalyze stratospheric ozone depletion. Chlorine. Chlorine from chlorofluorocarbons catalytically destroys ozone molecules. How does the ozone layer benefit human health? Reduce skin cancer risk. The ozone layer blocks UV radiation, lowering skin cancer risk. What process increased oxygen in Earth's atmosphere? Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis by cyanobacteria and plant increased atmospheric oxygen. What is a primary characteristics of the stratosphere? Ozone layer. The stratosphere contains the ozone layer critical for UV protection. Why does the southern hemisphere receive more solar energy in January? Earth axial tilt. The southern hemispheres tilt towards the sun in January, increasing solar inputs. What does Köppen classification D represents? Cold continental. Köppen D denotes cold, humid continental climates. What percentage of solar radiation is scattered by the atmosphere? 10%. About 10% of solar radiation is scattered by gases and aerosols. What factor least affects incoming solar radiation? Soil composition. Soil composition has minimal direct impact on solar radiation. What derives diurnal temperature changes? Earth rotation. Rotation causes day-night cycles driving temperature fluctuations. What determines the energy of electromagnetic radiation? Frequency. Energy is proportional to frequency. E is equal to H. Which wind belts dominates at high latitudes? Polar asterlies. Polar asterlies prevail at high latitudes due to the polar cell. What type of wind is caused by nighttime cooling on slopes? Katabatic. Katabatic wind flow downhills due to cooling at night. What enhanced monsoon rainfall in Bangladesh? Moist southwest winds. Moist southwest winds from the Bay of Bengal derive heavy monsoon rains. What forms the subtropical high pressure belts? Sinking cool air. Sinking air in the Hadley cell forms subtropical highs. Which force primarily derives wind movements? Pressure gradient force. Air moves from high to low pressure, initiating winds. What is a major source of moisture for South Asia's monsoon? Indian Oceans. The Indian Oceans, including the Bay of Bengal, supplies monsoon moisture. Which reservoir holds the most fresh water? Ice caps. Ice caps and glaciers store 68% of earth fresh water. Hot lifting mechanism involves air colliding at weather fronts, frontal wedging. Cold air forces warm air upward at fronts, forming clouds. Which cloud type is associated with heavy rainfall? Nimbostratus. Nimbostratus clouds produced steady, heavy rainfall. Hot forms when water vapor condenses in the air near the ground. Fog. Fog forms when water vapor condenses in the air near the surface. Hot process derive snow formation in cold clouds. Bergeron process. Ice crystal grow in cold clouds leading to snow. Hot is released when water freezes. Latent heat. Latent heat is released during phase change to ice. What does absolute humidity measure? Uh, Water vapor mass per volume. Absolute humidity quantifies water vapor in air with circulation. Cell derives trade winds. Hadley cells. The Hadley cells generates trade winds near the equator. What is a feature of a tropical cyclone eye walls? Intense winds. The eye wall contains the cyclone strongest winds and rains. What is the global effect of La Nina? Increased rainfall in Australia. La Nina enhanced rainfall in Australia and nearby regions. What initiates monsoon winds in Bangladesh? Land heating. Heat land creates low pressure, drawing moist air. What does Max Planck's law quantify for atmospheric radiation? Spectral emissions. It quantifies radiation emissions by wavelength and temperature. How does temperature affect tropospheric ozone formation? Enhance reactions. Higher temperature accelerate reactions forming ozone. What is a natural source of atmospheric aerosols? Wildfires. Wildfires release smoke and particles as aerosol. How do aerosol affect climate? Reflect sunlight. Aerosol reflects sunlight, causing cooling effects. What health issue is caused by fine aerosol? Respiratory irritation. Respiratory irritation. Fine aerosols irritate lungs, causing breathing issues. Hot gas contribute to nitric acid in acid rain. Nitrogen oxides. Nitrogen oxide reacts to form nitric acid in acid rain. How does acid rain affect aquatic ecosystem? Lowers pH. Acid rain acidifies water, harming aquatic life. Hot process transforms aerosol composition. Chemical reactions. Reactions like oxidation alter aerosol composition. What is essential for modeling pollutants transport? Wind patterns. Wind patterns determine pollutants dispersion paths. How are secondary aerosol formed? Gas to particle conversion. Gases like sulfur dioxide reacts to form secondary aerosols. What anthropogenic activity increases greenhouse gases? Industrial emissions. Industrial processes release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Which greenhouse gas is emitted from wastewater treatment? Methane. Methane is produced during anaerobic wastewater treatment. How does climate change affect Bangladesh's agriculture? Causes salinization. Sea level rise leads to saltwater intrusions harming crops. What indicates atmospheric instability in Bangladesh's monsoon? Rapid air ascent. Warm moist air rising triggers storms and heavy rain. What is a socio-economic impact of climate change in Bangladesh? Economic losses. Floods and cyclone cause economic damage to agriculture and infrastructure. What is a major source of atmospheric nitrogen oxides? Vehicles emissions. Combustion in vehicles engines produce nitrogen oxide, contributing to air pollution. Which atmospheric layer contains the ozone layer? Stratosphere. The stratosphere hosts the ozone layer, which absorbs UV radiation. What is a primary role of the atmosphere in the water cycle? Transport water vapor. The atmosphere moves water vapor, enabling precipitation globally. Why does temperature increase in the stratosphere with altitudes? Ozone absorption of UV. Ozone absorbs UV radiation, heating the stratosphere. Which gas has a long atmospheric lifetime and high global warming potential? Nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide has a lifetime of 112 years and significant warming potential. What chemical reaction primarily depletes stratospheric ozones? Chlorine catalysis. Chlorine from CFC catalyze ozone breakdown into oxide. How does the ozone layer benefit terrestrial ecosystem? Protects from UV radiation. Protects from UV radiation. The ozone layer shields plants and animals from harmful UV rays. What processes reduce carbon dioxide in Earth's early atmosphere? Carbon sequestration. Carbon dioxide was stored in rock and oceans, lowering atmospheric levels. What is a defining feature of the troposphere? Convection currents. Convection derives weather patterns in the troposphere. Why does the northern hemisphere receive less solar energy in January? Earth axial tilt. The northern hemisphere tilts away from the sun, reducing solar inputs. What does Köppen classification A represents? Tropical. Köppen A denotes warm, humid climates with high rainfall. What percentage of solar radiation is absorbed by the atmosphere? 20%. About 20% of solar radiation is absorbed by atmospheric gases and clouds. What factor most affects solar radiation reaching the surface? Atmospheric scattering. Scattering by aerosols and gases reduce surface radiations. What primarily derives seasonal temperature variations? Earth tilt. The tilt causes seasonal changes in solar radiation intensity. What is the characteristics of electromagnetic radiation in the atmosphere? Travels at light speed. Electromagnetic radiation travels at 3 into 10 ms in a ms inverse 1 in a vacuum. Which wind belt is associated with the intertropical convergence zone? Trade winds. Trade winds converge at the ITCZ, driving rainfall. What type of wind flows uphill during the day? Anabatic. Anabatic winds rise due to daytime heating of slopes. What sustained heavy rainfall in Bangladesh monsoon season? Moist southwest winds. Moist winds from the Bay of Bengal fuel monsoon rainfall. What creates the equatorial low pressure zone? Rising warm air. Intense solar heating causes air to rise, forming a low pressure zone. Which force deflect wind to the right in the northern hemisphere? Coriolis force. The Coriolis force deflect wind due to earth rotation. What is the major source of atmospheric moisture in Bangladesh? Bay of Bengal. Evaporation from the Bay of Bengal supplies monsoon moisture. Which reservoir holds the least water globally? Atmosphere. The atmosphere holds a small fraction of earth water. Hot lifting mechanism involves air masses converging, convergence, converging air masses rise, forming clouds. Which cloud type is associated with fair weather? Cumulus cloud are puffy and indicate clear weather. Hot forms when water vapor condenses on surfaces at night. Dew. Dew forms when water vapor condenses on cool surface. Hot process derives precipitation in warm clouds. Coalescence. Droplet collides and merge to form raindrops. Hot is absorbed during water melting. Latent heat. What does sensible heat primarily affect? Air temperature. Sensible heat changes air temperature without phase transitions. What is the dew point temperature? Saturation temperature. The dew point is when air becomes saturated, causing condensation. Which circulation cell derives polar estuaries? Polar cells. The polar cell generates estuarly winds near the poles. What is the feature of a tropical cyclone's ice calm condition? The eye is a low pressure calm region in the cyclone center. What is the common effect of El Nino on global weather? Increased rainfall in South America. El Nino causes heavy rainfall in regions like Peru. Hot sustains monsoon circulation in South Asia. The land ocean temperature contrast. Differential heating derives monsoon winds. What does Max Planck's law describe for atmospheric radiation? Spectral distribution. The quantifies radiation emissions by wavelength and temperature. How does temperature affect photochemical smoke formation? Enhanced reactions. Higher temperature accelerate reaction forming smoke. What is a natural source of atmospheric aerosols? Dust storms. Dust storms lift particles into the atmosphere as aerosols. How do fine aerosol impact visibility? Scatter light. Fine aerosol scatter sunlight, reducing visibility. What health issues is linked to ultra fine aerosol? Cardiovascular problems. Ultrafine particles can enter the bloodstreams, causing health issues. Hot gas contributes to acid rain formation. Sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide forms sulfuric acid, a key component of acid rain. How does acid rain affect infrastructure? Corrosive materials. Acid rain erodes buildings and infrastructure. Hot process forms secondary aerosols. Gas to particles conversion. Gases like sulfur dioxide reacts to form secondary aerosols. What is critical for modeling pollutants dispersion? Atmospheric stability. Stability affects how pollutants disperse vertically. How are primary aerosols generated? Mechanical processes. Processes like winds, erosion produce primary aerosols. Hot anthropogenic activity increases greenhouse gases. Deforestation reduce carbon sink, increasing carbon dioxide levels, which greenhouse gases emitted from rice paddies methane. Methane is produced by anaerobic decomposition in rice paddies. How does climate change affect Bangladesh's fisheries? Causes habitat loss. Rising temperature and salinity disrupt fish habitats. What causes atmospheric instability in Bangladesh's monsoon? Warm moist air rising warm moist air trigger storms and heavy rainfall. What is the socio-economic impact of Bangladesh climate change in Bangladesh? Displacement of communities,